So I am thrilled to be able to talk to you about this fieldwork because I finally got to go do it. I will not be sharing the skirt photo. So my research is on community well-being and conservation in Namibia, but this talk today is really more of a story about how this research evolved and unfolded in the field. So before I get started on my own work, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction on the program itself. So CBNRM stands for Community-Based Natural Resource Management, and the program has grown from 4 conservancies in 1998 to 83 conservancies today. The conservancies are the areas in green. The yellow is state protected areas, everything on the left is the desert. So the main idea behind the Conservancy program is to shift poaching incentives into conservation efforts driven by socioeconomic benefits tailored to community needs. So how does a Conservancy work? Well, a Conservancy is formed by several communities or villages that have come together and decided that they want to form a Conservancy. And to do this, they need 60% support of the total population within that area. Once they have that support, then they go ahead and draw Conservancy boundaries. This can take a very long time. Once that's done, they form a Conservancy committee. And this is made up of people like a chairperson, a manager, treasurer, field officers, game guards. In this photo, you can see a meeting going on outside of the Conservancy office, pictured on the right. And in this picture, you can see the game guards huddled in the middle, some of the Conservancy committee members sitting along the outside. And so once they've formed this committee, they can then register as a Conservancy. And the registration of a Conservancy gives communities legal rights to access, manage, and benefit from wildlife on communal land in return for commitment to sustainable management. So this means that the Conservancy decides how wildlife will be utilized. This can be in the form of trophy hunting. So this is a picture of a crocodile that was killed by a professional hunter in the morning. The carcass has been brought to the Conservancy office where it's about to be distributed to community members for meat, and the money goes back into the program as well. Crafts and tourism play a big role in how they manage and utilize wildlife. So if a private tourism operator wants to come into Conservancy land and build a lodge that's close to one of the national parks, they have to seek permission from the Conservancy board first and strike a deal saying that the Conservancy will get a certain percentage of the revenue. They also have to hire all their employees from within that Conservancy boundary. And, but if it's a skilled position like a chef, they're allowed to hire from outside of those boundaries. So all the cash that these activities generate goes into a Conservancy bank account, and that pays for the operation costs, but whatever is left over, a budget is created, and then at the end of the year, at the annual general meeting, the AGM, this budget is presented to the rest of the Conservancy members and they get to vote it in or out. And with this budget, they decide how the rest of the money will be spent. So sometimes that's through direct cash benefits, so each Conservancy member gets a little sum of cash at the end of the year. Other times they opt for indirect benefits like a community-wide project, so funneling that money into paying for electricity for a village or paying for school fees, elderly care, really anything that they decide to spend that money on. So the key takeaway here is that this program is about local people choosing to participate in conservation and manage these communal conservancies in a way they think works best for their communities. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's really tailored to local needs. So it's pretty evident that this program relies on the participation and cooperation of local people. The WWF has been involved with this program since its inception, and in 2016 they created something called the Sustainable Community Partnership, the SCP, and the SCP aims to strengthen the Conservancy program by improving the economic, health, and socio-political needs of people, so really bringing more of a traditional development work approach into the program. And to do this, the SCP needs to understand what matters most to local communities. So this is where I came in. Together with the SCP, we agreed that I could help them create a community well-being monitoring tool. And so with them, we made a list of parameters for this tool. So first and foremost, the idea was that the tool would be replicable and feasible. So something that would be used at least once a year, and ideally by a local person or someone working for the Conservancy program. So that way they don't have to bring in someone like me or another outsider once every year, every few years to do like a big costly analysis. It's something that can be, they can really look at the progress of the Conservancy over the years. So if it was going to be a local person using it, these Conservancy offices don't usually have computers or things like that. You're mostly working with pen and paper. So it needed to be easy to use and generate results that were easy to analyze. And it must move beyond traditional measures of well-being to include economic, social, environmental, cultural, and political concerns as well. So ultimately a tool that captures and is representative of the local definition of well-being. So I had my work cut out for me. And I turned to the well-being literature just to see what exists, what local well-being tools exist, if any, and if I could take any pieces of them and move forward with my own work. So for the most part, the literature agrees that well-being measures need to move beyond traditional objective measures, so things like GDP, literacy rates, etc., to use those things, but also include measures like political, environmental, social, and cultural concerns as well. So it's great that there's that agreement. But when looking for examples of how to measure well-being to include those things at the local scale, I ran into a few problems. The measures that existed out there were for mostly like larger scale analysis, so country to country comparisons, or they had predetermined definitions of well-being and pre-weighted indicators. And again, this is great for like large scale comparisons, but not what I was looking for. And then the local scale studies that did exist were really time and resource intense. So that would be great for producing these rigorous results for like a one-time study, but again, not great for what I was looking to do. So I headed to Namibia to do my fieldwork after some trials and tribulations. And my fieldwork took place in the Zambezi region, which is circled in red on the map. And this region is very different from the rest of the country. So Namibia is sandwiched between the Kalahari Desert and the Namib Desert, so it's quite dry. Whereas this little arm that sticks off has a major river flowing through it, so it's much more lush. It's landlocked by 4 other countries, has a couple very important wildlife corridors, and 3 national parks are actually all in that little area. So a lot of wildlife movement. And like with that arm sticking off, there's one major road that goes through this arm, and that is where everyone is settled, just directly off the arm. So I actually took this picture from the road. And then behind these homes is just bush, so a lot of wildlife there. So most people in the Zambezi region rely on agriculture as their main source of livelihood. So growing crops like maize and sorghum, and raising livestock like cattle. As I mentioned, a lot of wildlife movement in this area, which creates a lot of potential for human-wildlife conflict. And so a big topic of discussion is the elephant. Elephants are constantly moving between countries, going to the river as their water source or other water sources, and as they're doing this, they're walking through people's fields, trampling their crops, eating their crops a lot of the time. And for a group of people who rely on agriculture as their main source of livelihood, this can come as a huge shock to them. So once I arrived in the Zambezi area, I first conducted 15 semi-structured interviews across 6 conservancies in the area, and these interviews were with people closely affiliated with the Conservancy, so people like the Conservancy managers, field officers, game guards, etc. And in these interviews I was asking what seemed like basic questions, just what do you need to live a good life here? Can you tell me about life in the rainy season, the dry season, what's hardest about this season, the best thing about this season, what's most important to people here, and then asking if the Conservancy positively or negatively affected any of those things. So once I conducted those interviews, my research shifted focus to just one of those 6 conservancies, and this was really just for the sake of time and the depth of analysis I wanted to do for the remainder of my time. So the Conservancy I stayed at for the rest of the time was Mashi, and Mashi Conservancy is made up of 5 different villages or areas: Conga, Namushasha, Labuta, Lizauli, and Sechona. And so I conducted a small focus group at each of these 5 villages, and the focus groups were made up of men, women, older and younger people, and in one instance the local and traditional authority in the Induna. That was an accident. That's when I had to make the skirt out of a towel. Yeah, and the idea here was really that I had already talked to people closely affiliated with the Conservancy, and I just wanted the perspective of regular Conservancy and community members, so I asked them the same questions. And after I conducted those interviews and focus groups, I headed back to the city, Windhoek, for a few weeks, and there I transcribed and coded the audio from these interviews and focus groups and was looking for any well-being themes or indicators that emerged. And the idea was that I would use these themes to create this well-being monitoring tool, and then I would pilot this tool. So to my delight, there were 10 interrelated themes that emerged. I had no idea if that would happen or not. I don't have time to get into all of them today, but I will just give an example of one of them. And I just want to do this because even though there were 10 themes that came up within those 5 focus groups, and even beyond that, they were the same across all 6 conservancies, they were experienced very differently depending on where you lived within one conservancy or from conservancy to conservancy. So, wildlife. When it is time for cultivating, the wild animals disturb our fields. Unless we go there, sleep there, stay there, it's a challenge to us. So here, wildlife is a challenge. Our family, they got employment with the Conservancy, so we were happy about that. And also we get the benefits, like money they give us at the end of the year, and also the meat, all those things. Also they give money to our schools and our churches, so we rely on the Conservancy. So here they were talking about wildlife as a benefit through the Conservancy. And lastly, we are taking care of the wild animals for the future generations, for them, to know the zebra. I don't want to have to travel to other places to see the zebra. Wildlife is for the future generation also to use as a resource. So here, again, wildlife, but talked about in terms of existence value and importance to future generations. So this was the same across all the indicators. They were all the same themes, but experienced very differently. For example, in Mashi Conservancy, one of the villages that was located right by the river, they really struggled with access to clean and safe water because the river has higher potential for disease. Their cattle are going down to the river to drink. That means that they could be taken by a crocodile. So very different problems related to water. Whereas this place, Sechona, also in the same conservancy, they were further away from the river, which means they had a borehole dug for them, so they have readily available clean and safe water. So very different. And this gave me the idea that the person that should use or administer this well-being tool I was going to create should be the area representative. So as I've kind of explained, each conservancy is made up of several different villages, and each village has an area rep. And an area rep is a person from that village that acts as the intermediary between the village and the conservancy committee. So to me, this seemed like the best person to really represent those unique needs from each of those areas. So I wanted to create something that was really easy for this person to use, to fill out themselves, and they could use this tool as a visual at the budget meeting or maybe the annual general meeting and say, look, my community is doing well on this indicator, not well on this indicator, so maybe we could direct some funding towards this. So I created 3 possible well-being tools. Again, the idea here is just uptake, so they're very simple. So yeah, easy to use, but also something that has the potential to become more sophisticated over time. And so I brought these 3 tools back to Mashi Conservancy, but the first thing I did was I met with the entire Conservancy committee, the game guards, the area reps, and I sat down with them and went through the list of 10 indicators that I had extrapolated from my interviews and focus groups, and just went through the list with them, and I wanted to make sure that I had interpreted what they had told me correctly. So I gave them the opportunity to say, like, no, that should be taken off the list, that should be added. Luckily, it was just minor wording changes that needed to happen. And then I pulled the area reps aside so you can see them in this photo, each one from each region. and they piloted the 3 tools. So the first was a questionnaire. You can see, very simple to use. Has the 10 indicators listed, a few questions on each. I also included Conservancy at the bottom. The second tool was a Wellbeing web. I thought that this would be the best one. I don't know why I thought that, but I did, and it was the absolute worst. It took people so long to fill out. You can tell it's like messy to look at, confusing to look at. They actually laughed at me and they're like, there's no way I'm going to show this to my community. They're going to laugh at me. They won't understand this. So that was quickly ruled out. And the third option was a graph. So again, same idea as the web, a visual, 10 indicators at the bottom, and they can fill it out themselves. So these are actually completed versions by the area reps. And it was interesting because as I was watching them fill them out, I noticed that they completed the questionnaire first, and they used the questionnaire to guide how they would fill out the 2 visuals. So they were really using them in tandem. And after they completed all 3, we debriefed each one and talked about what worked, what didn't work, and then they took a vote on which tool that they would feel most comfortable and be most excited about using in the future. And the vote was split between the questionnaire and the graph, and they actually said we want to use both of these things together, which after witnessing how they were using them, I thought that was a great idea. So that is my recommendation to the WWF and the SCP, is to use these 2 things as a tool together. And hopefully this tool, like I said, can be an easy visual that can be shown at the AGM or meetings to give an idea of maybe funding should go here. And organizations like the WWF and SCP can, if they would like, collect these forms over time to look at how indicators are changing over the years, or to give them an idea of where workshops could be used, that kind of thing. So my preliminary findings from this research is that the Conservancy program is viewed as a positive contributor to community well-being for the most part. Second, consistent indicators. There were consistent indicators across all 5 focus groups and all 6 conservancies. And I think this is worth talking about and a big deal because I didn't even know if that would happen. And I think like qualitative and really local scale research, you can sometimes get worried that the details will be so dense that you won't maybe be able to get themes like that. But really this shows that those details can be aggregated up to some scale, and this definition was produced, or the set of indicators was produced at the local level. Third, well-being was viewed as a collective state rather than an individual benefit. I didn't get into those other the other 9 indicators, but that was a definite trend that I might explore more. And lastly, the methodological critique. As I mentioned, during that lit review, I really didn't come across much on local scale and self-assessment tools that measure community well-being in a way that encompass everything that well-being can be. And even though the tools I created and piloted were tailored to the specific structure of this program, I think that other programs could benefit from a similar type of self-assessment tool. So thank you to my supervisor, Dr. Terry Satterfield, the rest of my supervisory committee, Obisha Sayanga and Eben, my field assistants, my interview and focus group participants, the WWF and IRDNC, and my Badger group. Thanks. Yes. Thanks. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, so that's actually something that in the final version is getting changed, I think, to, we'll use different wording, but at the time it was just, I think what I have done is I'm going to match that with the questionnaire. So the questionnaire has the, not happy, okay, happy, so I'll do something more like that. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Or? Yeah. Metrics. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, so the goal was uptake, and I think this tool will just initially be used for kind of like immediate decision making. But if the WWF or other organizations do want to collect this and keep track of this tool, you can, I think in the future, if there is uptake, add metrics. So like from few people to all people, that could be 0 to 100, and then they could easily do that. But yeah, I was just trying to keep it as simple as possible in the beginning. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Yeah, so in the questionnaire, I think that's where the questionnaire helps, is it kind of breaks down what each one is. So it says we can live peacefully with wildlife, wildlife is good for life here. So it's more about human-wildlife conflict. But it doesn't capture the things like existence value, or we want this for our future generations. But a lot of these indicators were very interrelated. So like family is a huge thing. So maybe people want wildlife around for their family, so it's hard. Yeah. Yeah, it really varies seasonally, but there is something that the game guards are using called the event book, and they are doing everything that has to do with human-wildlife conflict, so I think that's kind of why I left that out a little bit, because they already have that data. Yeah. This one. Yeah. No, so like weighting or ranking kind of? No, that's actually something I was talking about with a friend the other day about if I was to go back, maybe implement a new layer to this in a couple years or something, that maybe ranking, or not even ranking, but saying this is what's most important to us right now. Or like rating each indicator like 1 out of 10, 5 out of 10 could be helpful. But no, this is supposed to be in general, our community is doing well on this, or this. Yes. Oh, I know. Yeah. Like the protected area or the Conservancy program, do you mean? I don't know if there is, and I didn't really, that's not what I'm claiming at the end, or I'm saying that in general, people were saying that they thought the Conservancy was better for life there, because it created jobs, that kind of, and provided them with meat and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, so I didn't really it wasn't really, when they fill out this tool, it's not based on how the Conservancy is affecting those things. It's just in general their well-being. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I didn't. It's hard because the people that I think would be struggling with human-wildlife conflict in a different way too would be the men that are out with the herds of cattle moving around. And of course I didn't get to talk to those people because they're out with their cattle. But no, I didn't. Actually, I noticed with younger people, they cared a lot about access to news and information, a lot. And that's something that older people didn't care so much about. And then the rest of them were, and employment, so different employment opportunities from agriculture. Yeah, so definitely differences between younger and older generations. Thank you.